Hi, it's Dwyer. Today is June the 23rd, 2017. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, we all have opinions on who is a great fighter or what constitutes a great fighter. It's my opinion, and I understand it's a minority opinion. But it's my opinion that the best heavyweight in the post-Lennox Lewis era was Vitaly Klitschko. Right? It takes a lot for me to consider a heavyweight to be great. I thought Vitaly Klitschko was great. I think it's almost poetic that Lennox Lewis's last fight was against Vitaly Klitschko, and that fight turned on a cut. Right? Well, Vitaly Klitschko was so good that, in my opinion, he literally ended guys' careers. Right? One of those guys is Tomasz Adamek. Klitschko went to Poland and put on one of the best heavyweight performances in recent memory. Really was outstanding. He battered Adamek to the point where you felt sorry for Adamek. Just like, by the way, he battered Shannon Briggs, right? In a fight where, you almost wanted to hop in the ring yourself to arrest the referee for allowing that fight to continue. Understand, Vitaly was a guy who was two-handed, tall, was a master, an absolute master. When it came to using length, was a master at catching punches on his forearms, was much faster than you thought he was, right? Hardly ever got rocked in fights. Underrated defense. I thought he was the total package, right? Of the heavyweights out there today, the only guy who I feel is in the conversation, just from a skill perspective, is Tyson Fury, right? But Tyson Fury himself would have to admit that he just hasn't done it as long or as often as Vitaly Klitschko, right? Tyson Fury, let's hope he comes back in the ring. But it's rare to find a heavyweight, and I know many of you are going to say, what about Anthony Joshua, right? What about Vladimir Klitschko, younger brother? It's hard to find a heavyweight who has it together like Vitaly did. Well, this video is actually about a Tomasz Adamek fight. Understand, Adamek, who went into that fight against Vitaly Klitschko with only one loss. One loss. And that was to Chad Dawson, when Chad Dawson had it together, right, at light heavy. Understand, Tomasz Adamek hasn't been the same since. He's had a series of very questionable fights, right? He recently lost to Eric Molina. He got stopped in that fight. He was so embarrassed by the ending of that fight that he announced his retirement from the sport after that fight. He fought Eddie Chambers. Eddie Chambers tore a muscle and could only use one hand. Understand, that fight went the distance. Prime Adamek would have stopped Eddie Chambers. Post-Vitaly Adamek didn't come close. Another questionable fight, Steve Cunningham, right? Many people thought Cunningham won that fight. Keep in mind, Adamek outweighed Cunningham by 20 pounds. But yet, there was Cunningham doling out the punishment on Tomasz Adamek. Adamek, simply put, let's not mix our words here. He's a shell of himself. Right? He's not the Adamek you remember. But the bet I like here is to take Adamek at -400. Hedged with his opponent Solomon Haumono by KO. Why? Because Haumono is extremely limited. Right? There is simply no way that Haumono is going to be able to box with Tomasz Adamek. Adamek is fluid. Adamek plays a levels game where you throw on him and it's hard to find his head because he has it tucked around his shoulder. Right? He was beating Molina on the scorecards by a wide margin before he got stopped. He's faster than Haumono. He's not faster than Steve Cunningham. He's not faster than Eddie Chambers, whose nickname is Fast Eddie Chambers. But he's faster than Solomon Haumono, who is so limited. And let's talk about the limitations. He's flat-footed. Right? When you're extremely flat-footed, when you're walking around the ring and you're not up on your toes, right? You can only throw punches when your feet are like this on the canvas. An elite fighter, and that's who Adamek is, right? Understand, Adamek has done some great things. Some could argue Adamek is a future Hall of Famer. Right? Adamek should be able to just look down at Haumono's feet. Take a step back. Right? Fight Haumono like Joseph Parker did, on his back foot. And as he's looking down at his feet, he should know when Haumono can throw punches and when he can't. In other words, if Haumono lifts up his lead foot, he can't throw a punch while he's lifting it up. Right? Let me also point out, too, that Haumono is slow. Right? This is a guy who took up boxing late. He's a big, powerful guy. He's slow. He has, in my opinion, no back foot game whatsoever. In other words, you're fighting him, you know he's coming forward. Right? You know you either can, like Floyd Mayweather used to, stand your ground in the pocket and have the guy walk into a shoulder. You could play a lateral game where he comes forward, you jump to the side and throw combinations. Or you can back away from him. But what you know he's not going to do is to back away from you. That's not who the guy is. The guy's a big bully. He's a hunter. He has no idea, none whatsoever, how to play the hunted. Haumono has a hole in his defense. Right? It's a big hole. First, let me say, the great Archie Moore used to come in like this. George Foreman, in fact, an Archie Moore disciple. And keep in mind, Foreman used to have Archie Moore in his corner. Food for thought. Would have a defense like this. Hard to hit the guy in the head. Hard to throw uppercuts on a fighter like this. Right? Haumono comes in like this. Now, while that's great for perhaps blocking hooks coming in from the outside, it leaves the middle of his body open. Right? He wants you to have to make a decision. Are you going to target the middle of his body, which would give him an opportunity to land his big right hand? Right? He's hoping to trade with you. Right? Are you going to target the middle here and start to trade with a big guy whose only chance is to land a big punch? Or are you going to try to throw hooks and move around the outside that he can try to block with his hands? Well, let me just say, what Joseph Parker did is he's backing up. So as Haumono comes forward with this defensive construct, Parker gets off a right uppercut. Because understand, this defense doesn't offer the benefits of this. Now, I know with this, you have a hard time, throwing punches, right? With this, I can go like this and pop a jab. With this, You know, you have to literally like turn your hand a bit. You don't want to slap a guy with a jab. Right? I would argue, though, that out of this stance, George Foreman had one of the best jabs in the heavyweight division in the last few decades. Well, let's just say, Haumono isn't George Foreman. He's going to be open up the middle. It's obvious on film. Let me also point out, too, he has very little upper body movement. This isn't Mike Tyson bending and swiveling at the waist, where you throw a punch, Tyson leans, punch misses, Tyson comes back. No, this guy's a bigger, older fighter. So he's like this, and he can't hide his body. He doesn't have that capability. So given the limitations Haumono has, I believe his only chance of winning this fight is by KO. But given that Adamek at this point, in my opinion, is a shot fighter, his chin's simply not what it used to be. He's having problems with guys who prime Adamek would have spanked. Right? Adamek's an older fighter himself. He has more wear on the tires than Haumono. Right? Let's just say Haumono by KO, in my opinion, has to be part of your betting portfolio. The fight's in Poland, Adamek's backyard. Haumono's not going over there to depend on the judges. Not with this lack of hand speed. Not with the complete absence of a back foot game. So, I do view Adamek against this limited an opponent at minus 400 to be a bargain. But I am going to hedge the play with Haumono by KO. Right? Keep in mind, he's a big underdog as it is. By KO should enable you to play the hedge. Right? This is a dangerous fight. Let's just say a lot could happen. But I don't envision one of those things being Haumono winning by decision. I just don't see it. But understand the risk involved. If Haumono wins by decision, you lose it all. That's how I see it. Let me hear from you. What I also want to challenge the boxing hardcore to do is to think about the heavyweights of the post-Lennox Lewis era. Right? Keep in mind, Vladimir Klitschko, champion for a long stretch, had car crashes. Right? That's Vladimir Klitschko down on the canvas twice against Sam Peter. Right? For those of you who are about to say, well, Peter lost that fight. Corey Sanders didn't. Corey Sanders beat Klitschko. That's Klitschko looking completely winded and out of it against Lehman Brewster. Right? Now, Vitaly Klitschko loses to Lennox Lewis on an eye injury. He's fighting Chris Bird. Now, I'll agree that if you look at the film, this was always Chris Bird's point. Chris Bird seems to be doing better later in that fight. He thought Vitaly Klitschko was looking for a way out. But Vitaly Klitschko suffers a rotator cuff injury in a fight that he's winning. And he panics a little bit and doesn't continue. Folks, that's the only other loss on Vitaly Klitschko's entire record. Right? Only 2 losses. One to Lennox Lewis, one to Chris Bird. Right? And the Chris Bird fight, he's winning. There are no early knockouts, which is what Corey Sanders got over brother Vladimir. There are no fights where Vitaly Klitschko's hitting the canvas twice. Right? There are no early losses in his career before he fights Lennox Lewis. Right? Yes, Ross Purity did beat Vladimir Klitschko. Right? And the fight really was in Vladimir's backyard. Right? Some of the other champions of note during that stretch at heavyweight, David Haye, I'll agree, big time puncher. Right? faster hands than Vladimir or Vitaly Klitschko. The problem, though, is you saw that Hay had a problem, and it was a severe problem, with Vladimir Klitschko's length. You also saw that Hay had a problem with Vladimir Klitschko's jab. So Hay's volume was greatly reduced. Look at the CompuBox numbers for that fight. Hay's volume was greatly reduced for that fight, right? Well, Vitaly's taller than Vladimir. Vitaly even better at using length than Vladimir Klitschko. Vitaly also had a jab. Look at Vitaly against Sam Peter, right? Sam Peter, who gets in on Vladimir Klitschko, gets battered by Vitaly Klitschko, right? Well, if you want to see a great fighter against a very good fighter with an excellent career, take a look at that Vitaly Klitschko Tomasz Adamek fight in Poland, right? Understand, Vitaly didn't run. Vitaly meets Adamek in the middle of the ring and then proceeds to deconstruct a very good boxer, right? Think about it, right? Adamek, let's just say, hasn't been the same since. He's lost, in fact, 3 of his last 4 fights. Let's just say, though, that this guy, Solomon Haumono, right, who took up the sport late, looks like a guy who took up the sport late, right? His only chance is a puncher's chance, right? If he somehow finds a way to outbox Adamek and get a decision, then Adamek needs to quit right there in the ring, right? Because that would be an embarrassment, right? I like Adamek to win even at the -400. I'll hedge the play with Haumono by KO. That's how I see it. Let me hear from you. Thanks for stopping by.